Thanks, Bruce. I'm back here right now backstage. I'll be interviewing the fighters as they come out of the octagon, and I'll also be
Joe Rogan. You've probably heard his name from a podcast, a UFC fight, or maybe even a comedy show. But how did he go from being just another guy to one of the most powerful voices in media? This is not just a story about fame. It's about struggle, risk, and some really unexpected turns. Before he made $200 million through his podcast, Joe was a fighter. A real one. He didn't grow up with fame or fortune. In fact, his childhood was rough, but that didn't stop him. Instead, it made him stronger. In this video, we'll explore the real journey of Joe Rogan, from a scared kid to a fearless martial artist, to a stand-up comedian, and finally to one of the biggest podcast hosts in the world. You'll be surprised at how many times he almost gave up, but kept going anyway. Let's begin. Early life and tough childhood. Joe Rogan was born on August 11, 1967 in Newark, New Jersey. His full name is Joseph James Rogan. His family had both Irish and Italian roots. When Joe was just 5 years old, his parents got divorced. After that, he lived with his mother, and they moved around a lot. First to San Francisco, then to Florida, and finally to Massachusetts. Joe has said he saw violence at home when he was young. He doesn't talk to his dad anymore and hasn't seen him since he was 7. But he says he doesn't hate him. He just moved on. Even though his early years were full of changes and problems, Joe found something that gave him strength: martial arts. As a kid, he was scared of being a loser, but when he started training, everything changed. Martial arts changed his life. At age 14, Joe began learning karate. Then at 15, he added taekwondo to his training. He didn't just do it for fun, he got really good at it. By the time he was 19, Joe won the US Open Taekwondo Championship. He was the lightweight champion and became state champion in Massachusetts for 4 years straight. He even started teaching martial arts to others, but everything has a cost. By age 21, Joe started getting bad headaches. He worried that if he kept fighting, he could get seriously hurt. So he made a big decision. He stopped competing. That was hard for him, but it opened a new door. The first step into comedy. Joe never dreamed of being a comedian, but he loved making people laugh. While training in martial arts, he often told jokes to his friends at the gym. They pushed him to try stand-up comedy. After 6 months of practicing and writing jokes, Joe finally got on stage in Boston at a small comedy club. It was 1988. He was just 21. That one night changed his life. He realized he had found something new to fight for, but this time with words instead of fists. Struggling to make it, after his first stand-up show, Joe Rogan didn't become famous overnight. In fact, life got harder. He took small comedy gigs around Boston, but needed more money to survive. So he worked many different jobs. He taught martial arts at Boston University, delivered newspapers, drove a limo, worked in construction, and even helped a private investigator. At night, he performed at comedy clubs and bachelor parties. Anywhere people would let him tell jokes. His comedy style was edgy and bold. It wasn't always clean or polite, but it was real. One night, a talent manager named Jeff Sussman saw Joe perform and liked what he saw. He offered to become his manager. Joe said yes. That moment would later help him get big breaks. Joe Rogan gets on TV. Soon after arriving in LA, Joe got a chance to perform on MTV's half-hour comedy hour. People liked him. MTV offered him a deal for more appearances. Then, Disney showed interest. A bidding war started between networks. Joe signed a development deal with Disney and landed a role on a show called Hardball. It was his first big acting job, where he played a cocky baseball player. But Joe's big break came in 1995 when he joined the NBC sitcom News Radio. He played an electrician named Joe Garelli. It wasn't just another role. He got to work closely with writers and shape the character. He described the role as a dumbed-down version of himself. The show ran until 1999 and made Joe a familiar face across America. A close friendship and a heartbreaking loss. While working on News Radio, Joe became close friends with co-star Phil Hartman. They spent time together on and off set. Phil talked to Joe about his troubled marriage. Joe even begged him to leave his wife for his own safety. but Phil didn't want to split his family. In 1998, tragedy struck. Phil Hartman was killed by his wife in a shocking murder-suicide. Joe was devastated. He canceled all his comedy shows for a week. This loss stayed with him for years. It reminded him how fragile life is. Back to his roots with UFC, Joe had always loved martial arts. In 1997, he got a chance to work with the UFC as a backstage interviewer. He was a fan of the sport, especially after watching Royce Gracie fight in 1994. But the pay wasn't great, so Joe quit after 2 years. In 2002, after UFC was bought by a new company, Dana White, now the UFC president, offered Joe a job as a color commentator. At first, Joe didn't want to be paid. He just wanted good seats for the fights. After 15 free gigs, he finally agreed to take payment. From Fear Factor to national fame. In 2001, Joe got an offer to host a new TV show called Fear Factor. At first, he thought it was a joke. Who would watch people eat bugs or hang off helicopters? But his manager told him to take the job. It might help his comedy career. Joe agreed, and it turned out to be a smart move. Fear Factor made Joe Rogan a household name. The show ran for 6 seasons, and people across the country knew his face. Joe used the money and fame to support his stand-up career. Bigger crowds came to see him live, and he had new material to joke about, like watching people freak out on national TV. The rise of a podcast legend. In 2009, Joe started something new, the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. At first, it was just him and his friends talking about life, science, comedy, and weird ideas. No one thought it would become a big deal, but slowly, the audience grew. People liked how real and uncensored Joe was. By 2015, his podcast was one of the most popular in the world. Guests like Elon Musk, scientists, fighters, and comedians came to chat for hours. People listened in the gym, in the car, and even while cooking. Joe wasn't just a host. He was now a major voice in culture and conversation. A $200 million deal in 2020, Joe Rogan signed an exclusive deal with Spotify. They paid him $200 million to bring his podcast to their platform. It was one of the biggest podcast deals ever made. And it didn't stop there. By 2024, he signed a new deal for $250 million, although this time he wasn't exclusive anymore. Joe went from making people laugh at comedy clubs to running one of the most powerful shows on earth. His podcast-shaped opinions sparked debates and reached millions every week. Inside Joe Rogan's luxury lifestyle. With all his success, Joe also built a life of comfort and style. In 2020, he moved to Texas and bought a $14.4 million mansion in Austin. The home sits by Lake Austin and has everything, from a rustic kitchen and home gym to glass walls that let sunlight pour in. Joe also made sure the home reflected his love for nature, privacy, and martial arts. A life built on curiosity. Joe is more than just a podcaster or comedian. He's curious about everything: martial arts, science, health, and life's biggest questions. He's trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, reached black belt level, and even spends time in sensory tanks to explore his mind. He talks about these experiences on his show, helping others open their minds too. Joe Rogan started as a kid who was afraid of losing. But instead of giving up, he turned fear into fuel. He trained hard, learned new skills, took big risks, and kept going, even when life was tough. Today, he's a $200 million podcaster, a martial artist, a comedian, and a voice millions listen to. His journey proves that you don't need to follow a straight path. You just need to keep pushing forward, stay curious, and stay true to yourself. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and hit that subscribe button. We'll see you in the next one.